Alright, I am back with another Destiny 2 video. No more Stellar Blade controversies for the moment. Given reset this week and what arrives, I thought it was a good time for sort of a grand review of, I guess, not this season, but, you know, Into the Light in general, which I would argue is probably better than the season itself, even though it's like way less content. So that includes Into the Light stuff, Onslaught, the weapon pool, and then as of yesterday, Pantheon launch, which is the new boss rush mode for, you know, raiders to just go through bosses after bosses. And there was a little like competition yesterday among content creators and teams. I have not run it, which you may not be surprised by since I'm not like Mr. Raider or anything. I did watch the streams to see kind of what it was like. It looks awesome. I know people are really satisfied with it. Again, this is something that players have been asking for a really long time. And it's kind of this high-end PvE challenge thing that we have not really seen before, and it's different than just running, you know, straight up a hard mode raid. You're cutting out all the fat, you're just doing these encounters, you have modifiers, you have, you know, all these different things going into it, and it seems like a really good activity. There are some complaints that this is a limited time thing where it will be going away in, what is it, a month? You know, I guess when Final Shape arrives, somewhere around there. I sort of get that in the sense that they want to, I think they want to make this sort of an event, and I think they will bring this back in the future with like new bosses, new challenges, things like that for kind of limited time runs. I can understand that. I can understand why you would have this thing be more of a limited time event than something that runs just around the clock forever. But I sort of get why people are tired of limited time things that go away as well. I just assume this is coming back. If it's not coming back, then that sort of sucks, but yeah. Into the Light, Onslaught. I am just so deeply impressed with the fact that they threw this together in such a short amount of time. Unlike, you know, past delays, this didn't really have as much of a heads up as past ones. Like they, you know, for instance, they designed the 30th anniversary content well ahead of time. You know, they did the dungeon, they did Dares of Eternity. That is substantively start to finish more content than, you know, putting a horde mode in 2 PvP maps in a patrol zone, and then building a little trophy room. So it's, you know, it's less quote unquote new content, and yet I think most people would view this as a very compelling experience for the most part. Yes, it can get a little dull after your bazillionth Onslaught run, and some, you know, some of the early waves feel like kind of time wasters, but like this is at least some variation of what players have been asking for a really long time. I think especially after they recently upped the rewards with more drops, more tokens, things like that, it's felt a little less rewarding and a little bit less of a time sink. I think they fully delivered on the idea that this was sort of a menagerie level loot explosion. Like you can, you know, between random drops, like which they added, between double drops at the end, between milestones you're hitting at the same time, between getting every chest, and between all the tokens you get, it's a ton of drops per run. And you need a ton of drops because there are 12 weapons that are back, and you want specific rolls of them. If you really, really want those shinies, then you need even more drops because the drop rate is very low. I think it's somewhere between 1 and 5%. It's very low. So the biggest problem with that, of course, is that the shinies are a limited time offering, and I think everyone will be pretty disappointed when those go away. I do not agree with making those a limited time offering. That is a sort of thing that I do not think is important, because I think it is a key part of the loot chase here, where some people cannot care about shinies at all. Some people really want shinies. There is really no meaningful difference between shinies and not shinies, other than you have a slightly better chance getting the perks you want because it's double perks and it's a different shader. So I think that is a good chase. I see no reason for it to go away. In terms of the weapons themselves, I think this is a good collection to have brought back for the most part. I very much enjoyed going for different rolls on these classic weapons. Some are, you know, not, if not best in slot, close to best in slot, or sometimes besting their old versions in a few ways. There are some exceptions. I don't think anyone is super thrilled about Falling Guillotine or Succession returning, but like, you know, getting new versions of Mountaintop, Luna's Howl, Midnight Coup, you know, I would say most of these are appealing weapons that people wanted to see return and are enjoying playing with now that they're back. It's the focusing system is really good. Like, this whole thing is sort of what I view as a significant antidote to crafting. You can heavily focus on one weapon to the point where it's pretty much 50% or more of your drops. The amount of loot here is something impressive. Double perks on shinies, even though it doesn't happen that often, is another way to get what you want. And all of these, at a later point, will have enhanceable perks. So this is directly competing with crafting in a way that I think is fantastic. At this, you know, I still don't love crafting, but I understand at this point that it is going to coexist with normal looting probably forever. I think there should be less things that you are able to craft. Seasonal weapons, sure. Other weapons, not so much. But I believe that this system teaches us a lot of valuable lessons about what looting can look like, where there's still a grind, but it's not like the most frustrating grind in the history of time, because there's all these different paths to getting a lot of loot, to getting something like enhanced perks. Again, I don't think shiny should go away, but that's kind of another loot pursuit that I think is interesting and takes you sort of above crafting in a lot of ways. In terms of Onslaught itself, I really enjoy it. I think it is a fantastic activity for trying out a number of builds. Like, there are many viable builds for this, at least in normal mode. And I'd say for like the average player, Onslaught normal mode is a solid kind of balance of, you know, easy at first, gets harder over time, and like you can easily fail this depending on, you know, if you get the wrong modifiers, if you get the wrong guys spawning and you can't pull your team together. The diversity of builds you can use here is impressive. Like, yeah, you can do your normal good, like Orpheus tether and your well and stuff, but like you can go mass strand unraveling, you can go stasis because you can block off walls and stuff. People are using Salvation's grip in this because it's like a totally different you know, format of preventing enemies from getting to a space. You know, this is the solar strand season, but there are, you know, arc builds that would do great here, there are void builds that do great here. It's really something. This is a little different on Legend because Legend makes you go a lot more into the meta. You have to focus more on champions. You got to deal with much more intense tormentors. So like you need a little bit more of a focus loadout. So build diversity there is not really as widespread, but I think most people are just running the normal mode. And then obviously the 10 wave one exists when you don't have time to do a full run. I will say, I think a full hour for 50 wave run is a little excessive because it can be tough to commit to that amount of time when, like, it's not a raid, it's not a dungeon, like it's almost a you know, a ritual activity, even the 50 wave version. So it can be a little frustrating to like get kicked at the end or near at the end if you disconnect or something, or if, you know, this happens all the time now. Players are just leaving randomly. Maybe they're getting kicked. I don't know. Sometimes they're replaced. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes this happens at a really bad time where a bunch of stuff will spawn and you'll lose your ADU because you can't manage it with, you know, 1.5 teammates. So that aspect can be frustrating, especially since the later stages are more geared heavily to more tokens and more rewards. I don't think... I really don't like the Cosmodrome map. That is just not that it's hard per se, like it's actually, I think it's easier in a lot of ways because you can see enemies coming from so far away rather than just them like cluster killing you. However, it's so spread out, and you have these instances where like a dropship will show up and drop a single thrall like that extends around by like 45 seconds. Stuff like that. You know, those runs I think are average like 10 to 15 minutes longer than the other two maps, which I don't think is good, and I don't think that one is terribly well designed. I think there is some amount of fat in here that they could trim. I get why they have the Spark running segment as just something to break up 10 waves in a row, but that just feels very pointless. Like, it feels like killing time in a way that is not terribly interesting. It's a lot less enemies. You kill 3 yellow bars, you do a little dodge around the dude and dunk the Spark. Like, it's doing like what, 4 or 5 of those per run when it's an extra couple of minutes. You know, that adds up, and I just don't think that's a very good aspect of this. I really want to see them continuing to invest in Onslaught. I've said this before. I think this could be a great activity to expand to other maps, expand to other enemy races, get new rewards in there. This has so much potential, but I just worry that because it's a free activity, like Dares of Eternity, where that also seemed like it could be invested in a lot further, it's not going to happen because they don't tend to focus on free activities nearly as much as they do the paid, episodic, paid, seasonal content, which is a shame. Bungie is doing amazingly right now in terms of content production, in terms of answering fan demands, building stuff that people have wanted forever, making quality of life changes people have wanted forever. Like, they have really pulled out all the stops to sort of please the player base, and I think it's working very well, especially since Into the Light launch. I think that was... I'm just so incredibly impressed with what they were able to put out here. And then in addition, we learned all this new stuff about Final Shape, where, hey, we built an entire enemy race to some extent with this expansion. Oh, we did this prismatic subclass that is combining all powers in a way that looks extremely wild. Like, what they've been able to produce in, I would say, in the delay period, or even since the layoffs, when everyone has been so demotivated and they slimmed down their team by like 10%, like, working in those conditions, that is so impressive. I think they've done a great job, and they deserve a lot of accolades for this. I wrote today about how I continue to be worried about going forward, because I think the Final Shape is a hard stopping point for many players, and retaining them after that just through these disconnected episodes, I am concerned about how that's going to go over. What might happen to the player count? Like, what happens to revenue if revenue's already down? But I guess we'll touch on that another day, or you can just go read my article. But yeah, if I am doing a final review of Into the Light content in general, I am extremely impressed. I think they have done a fantastic job here, and this is one of the best activities I think they've ever made. If not the best, honestly, like, it's close. It's honestly close. The Coil, also this season, was one of my favorite activities they've ever done. The only problem with the Coil ended up being that eventually, because of crafting, you just sort of ran out of reasons to run it, and there was no real point in continuing to run it at the level that, getting through all the segments and stuff. Yeah. So I'm hoping to see this continue. I'm hoping Bungie continues to fire on all cylinders like this. I believe the Final Shape is going to be very, very good. That is the sense I'm getting, both in terms of what I've seen, both from hearing from Bungie internally. I think it's going to be really good. That does not necessarily mean, Destiny is going to be super healthy after that, but in terms of what we have to look forward to in the near term, the next month, yeah, I'm excited for that, certainly. So yeah, anyway, rare ultra positivity video there for you. These never do very well, but, it's the nature, and I can't pretend I'm not very much liking this whole Into the Light thing, and that they've done very well with it. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.